Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our first opening series episode, sponsored by Cisco also. But this is the Security and Risk Professional Insight series. We'll be looking at advancements and applications for critical infrastructure protection and high security environments. This is our fifth year that we've been running this particular series. It used to be called the Security Consultant Insight series. And this is also an official lead-up event to our Indo-Pacific Robotics, Autonomy, AI and Cyber Conference being held in Perth later this year, which is an adjacent event to the International Astronautical Congress being held at ICC here in Sydney in September. This session we're going to be diving into connecting and protecting in the age of AI. Follows an interview Carl and I did for My Security TV last month. But I'll introduce our panel. Carl Solder, the Chief Technology Officer with Cisco Australia and New Zealand. Carl, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And David Sirocki, AI Architecture Lead with Cisco Systems. David, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good to see you.
Just as an introduction, for those who don't know, hopefully you do, my name is Chris Covage. I'll be the moderator session, and I'm the Director and Executive Editor for My Security Media. And again, this is the Security and Professional Insight series. Our national partners are Fugro Spark and Curtin University. And our series and session sponsors are Security Exhibition and Conference being held at ICC in August, Kinetic IT, Cisco and Vanta. The protocols for this session will go for no more than an hour, so we will stop at the top of the hour. This session recorded and will be made available and hopefully by tomorrow, and questions are very welcome. Happy to go as technical as the audience wants, particularly when you've got the AI architect here and the CTO with Cisco, but please use the Q&A as well, but also welcome to let us know where you're listening from. So without further ado, we'll get underway. Carl and David. Carl, maybe introduce us to your role with Cisco. Then we'll move over to David. But before we do, I just want to very much, I've got one more slide here that I've missed. Just as a setting the scene, there's a number of links that I've just put into the chat there as well. But the State of AI Security is an annual report from Cisco, which outlines the AI threat landscape, developments of AI policy and AI security research. So it was one of those things I wanted to at least set the scene, and we'll cover off as much as we possibly can in this session with that report. But Carl, maybe introduce us to your role in AI defence as well, and then we'll move over to David.
Sure. So thanks for that, Chris. So my name's Carl Solder. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Cisco Australia and New Zealand. In my role, I get to spend a lot of time talking to customers across the ANZ space of organisations. Interesting to learn and hear what's top of mind. It's an opportunity for us to obviously share what Cisco is doing with respect to the portfolio of solutions that we bring to market, but also getting a good understanding of what's top of mind, what are the challenges and concerns of those customers, which we use to then feed back into our engineering organisation, representing kind of the ANZ customer voice, which helps to drive the various developments that we bring out of our engineering organisation to our customers. Over to you, David.
Good. Thank you. And just to the audience, I think Carl's hit a note on there. What is top of mind, particularly from security professionals at the moment in this regard? Some may still be learning relatively new, and others might be quite advanced. So again, I think we'd love to hear more from the audience. David, you're probably there at the forefront in terms of developing the architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I seem to catch the forefront of everything. I spent 15 years at Microsoft in Seattle building and shipping products during the dot-com boom. And then the last 6, I've been building out AI teams and AI capability around the region through Asia. So looking forward to diving deep, hopefully, on some of these topics. Let's go as technical as you'd like.
Beautiful. Okay, well, look, I mentioned the threat landscape here. Maybe just a general discussion, if we can, on the AI threat landscape, particularly with my editor's hat on. There's a lot of integrations coming through. One of the links I put up was the integration there with Cisco and NVIDIA as well. But yeah, Carl, do you want to sort of just give an overview of the threat landscape and what you're currently seeing?
Sure. So look, I'll probably take a step back and just kind of lay the land first. Cisco themselves have been working on AI for a very long time. In fact, our first AI developments happened as far back as 2010. We've been working on this for quite some time, looking to incorporate and take advantage of the various AI technologies and bring that into our broader portfolio. But I think it was the launch of ChatGPT back in a couple of years back where the awareness around this whole ecosystem has really started to resonate with customers as they understand the technology and the opportunities and capabilities. But of course, that introduces a brand new attack surface for those threat actors out there to potentially take advantage of and compromise. So while we have generally across the industry a very good portfolio of security solutions that do a whole range of things to improve the security posture of the organization, not a lot of thought has kind of been applied to this new emerging area of AI. When you have these large language models, you have the applications, the prompts and responses that go back between the users and those particular solutions. There's not as high a level of maturity around the security solutions that are in place across the industry today. And so for that reason, Cisco actually started to think and recognize that this would become a big problem. And a couple of years ago, we started to do some work on a new solution that we recently introduced to market, a solution called AI Defence. And this solution is quite an interesting solution because it, rather than focusing on securing who can connect applications, this solution is really looking at focusing on securing how users use those solutions. So sitting at the foundation of this, of course, has to be the infrastructure. And the slide that Chris is sharing with you right now is kind of showing some of the base foundational technologies that we're looking to bring into play that are going to be ultimately supporting those large language models and also the applications that tap into that then front end or interface with your users or with your employees that allow them to leverage and take advantage of those AI capabilities. So at a very high level, this is kind of 10 areas of innovation that Cisco is focusing on. First and foremost, when you start looking at the infrastructure, it's all about the silicon that actually sits at the heart of those networking devices, those compute devices. And this is centered around our Silicon One technology. And what we're doing here is we're focusing on primarily Ethernet as the base technology that will service that connectivity. When you start to look at AI and the enormous amounts of data that gets passed between compute clusters, backwards and forwards between users, obviously you have to have a good complement of bandwidth. And this is where you start to see our focus on high capacity Ethernet, 400 gig, 800 gig, and in the future, heaven forbid, 1.6 terabit Ethernet. This silicon, of course, is programmable, which means that we can modify the behavior and capability of those devices. So when a customer invests in a particular network device, understand that the capability of that device can be changed through a new updated microcode load down the line, which might introduce new capabilities into that hardware, thus extending the life of that product for the customer. As part of that, we're also looking at leveraging partnerships with companies like AMD, with Intel, and of course with NVIDIA, taking advantage of their GPUs and DPUs, which is all about accelerating those AI workloads. GPUs, of course, run to the heart of supporting AI workloads. DPU is a new area of interest where kind of like you can think of like a GPU to a CPU. A DPU is to a way in which we can improve packet processing that would go through a network interface card. So here you can look at specific and discrete services running on that DPU to accelerate functionality and maintain high levels of performance through the networking device. We're also recognizing that while customers have historically pulled together a data center by what we call a la carte, that's you grab a compute platform, you grab some storage, you grab some networking, and you munch it together to service your specific needs. We're recognizing that customers are also now wanting to find an easier button. And so services like our forthcoming Hyper Fabric, which is an as-a-service data center solution where you have a SaaS-based controller operating and managing a full stack, which could be compute, storage, and networking. There's also situations where we're also bringing to market pre-packaged AI pods. And so you can think of this as a collection of compute, storage, and networking, which has been pre-configured, rack stacked, cabled, software loaded, and designed to support different AI use cases, be it kind of a smaller AI model that might only be a $7 to $10 billion parameter model, up to the higher end AI models. These are obviously been engineered and designed and tested to support different use cases, whether it be training, whether it be inferencing, whether it be RAG. So these are also solutions that we're bringing to market. And it kind of wraps up the infrastructure story with optics. Of course, we have to provide connectivity and validated designs, which are testing efforts that our engineering teams take to test the collection of services that you see there above, to make sure that when they go into customers' networks, we provide these validated design templates that customers can literally copy and paste into their own environment, knowing that when they implement that solution, it has already been pre-tested by Cisco and validated to work and achieve the outcomes that it's designed to support. So that represents the kind of the base level infrastructure that we have there. And then sitting on top of that, we will then have the ability to host and run the AI models and the applications that you ultimately will be delivering and providing to your end users and customers as well. Now, wrapping around that, when you start to think about the AI market as it stands, a lot of customers are at different points in their journey with respect to where they're at in deploying AI. And recently, Cisco actually launched a study, what we call the AI Readiness Index. This is a commissioned survey that we did pretty much, I think it was just under 8,200 organizations globally, across 30 different countries. And the intention of that was to kind of get into the mindset of those customers, to understand where their heads were at with respect to AI. And so while we had a line of questioning around what they thought around the AI market, but there was also a line of questioning around how ready are they to actually start adopting and deploying AI. And we saw some really interesting numbers come back with respect from a global Asia Pacific number and also an Australia New Zealand number. And what we saw, unfortunately, not good for Australia, while the overall market of those 8,200 organizations globally, we saw a 15% of those organizations who believed that they were fully ready to start adopting and deploying AI. Of those organizations that were polled that were Australian, only 4% of those Australian organizations believed that they were ready to actually start using and adopting AI. So there's a bit of work I think we have to do as a country, and for all of the customers and organizations that are inside Australia, to start getting themselves ready. And it really starts with this slide that you have here, getting in place the right infrastructure so that you're then prepared to start testing out, deploying, and start making available those AI applications to your customers and end users.
I've got a couple of questions, Carl, and again from the audience, welcome any clarifications. DPU would be data processing unit, I'm taking?
Correct. DPU is a data processing unit. It is a way in which we can accelerate data packet processing. So as data is coming into and out of the networking device, we can fast track or accelerate that service. So examples of things that we've done in the past with DPUs could be things like fragmentation and reassembly. So if you're sending jumbo frames and you need to fragment those up into smaller 1,500 byte chunks, that typically might have been done by the CPU inside the network device, but we can now have that function running in a DPU and fast track and accelerate that. Things like encryption would be another example where you're encrypting or decrypting data. We can run that on the DPU, but we can also now start to move towards some more advanced type of functionality. So recently Cisco introduced a new solution called HyperShield. It's a distributed firewall solution. So we can actually run a HyperShield enforcement point on a DPU, and that effectively lets us run a firewall on a per switch port basis inside a switch. So these are some of the ideas that we're looking to start to bring into play as we start to take advantage of these new advanced hardware services.
And a couple others on the programmable silicon. I take it that's controlling power. You can start to program the power usage and those kind of things, or is this just purely on the security side?
So this is actually inside the switch is an ASIC, and the ASIC is responsible for forwarding data from point A to point B. And inside the ASIC, there will be a whole host of functions that the ASIC will provide. So it will be IPv4, IPv6 forwarding lookup. It will be quality of service. It will be NetFlow. It will be security, All of those functions, multicast, all that is performed inside the ASIC. What we do with the programmable silicon or the programmability side is that in the past, probably go back 10 years, if a company was to build a chipset to actually create a switch, for example, that chipset would go off to the manufacturer, it would be fabricated, it will come back, it will be fixed in capability. So if down the track a new capability came out, let's shall we say, for example, 10 years ago, VXLAN was not a reality. It was not invented. But then we created a chipset and VXLAN came out and we wanted to add VXLAN in. We'd have to go away, excuse me, and create a brand new chip or a brand new ASIC. What the programmable silicon lets us do now is add those functionalities into the chipset post the chip being created. So you can think of like a square and a line running through the center, and a packet will come in on the left-hand side. It will go through a series of stages of processing inside that square and pop out the other side, and it'll be sent to its target destination. What we can do with this programmable silicon, using the industry standard P4 programming language, we can actually modify the behavior of those processing stages inside that ASIC. So for example, if the industry came out with a VXLAN 2.0 or 3.0, we can now integrate that capability into the chipset, into the ASIC, and that ASIC now can actually support that function post you actually acquiring the product. So it's a way for us to make sure that as the industry innovates and comes out with new functionality in terms of forwarding, that we can now update and modify the behavior of that chipset to support that new capability. It's pretty cool.
Very good. And the last one I've got, well, they're somewhat related in terms of the skill sets needed to sort of dive into this and how much of, and we'll come back to David shortly in terms of the architecture, but this all needs to be sitting on Cisco architecture, I imagine, to all integrate correctly. But just in terms of the use cases and the potential application of enterprise data or sample data, is there sample data in there to sort of train the users at the user level to upskill users, or is this ready for live enterprise data and how to protect that data?
So we're talking about the infrastructure that we're talking about here. Is that
correct? Yeah, the a la carte infrastructure and as a service DC.
All right. Okay. So yeah, the a la carte infrastructure really is talking about. So Cisco brings to market a series of networking devices, a series of compute devices, and a series of storage devices. Sometimes it's a Cisco device, sometimes it's working in partnership with another company. For example, it could be a Pure Storage, it could be Nutanix, it could be a NetApp. So a la carte really refers to the process where we give customers the choice of picking and choosing the different components that they want to bring together to service the very prescriptive needs of their data center and the applications that will be run on top of that. The as a service data center offering is slightly different, because what we're doing there is we're trying to make it a little bit simpler. And also, by the way, the full stack AI pods, what we're trying to do there is make it a little bit simpler for the customer to consume. So what we're doing there is, like for example, on the on the as a service data center, we provide a SaaS-based controller. So in the a la carte, you might actually acquire the controller from Cisco. It's on you to then responsibly manage that, the life cycle day 0, day 1, day 2. With an as a service data center offering, the controller, for example, is fully managed by Cisco. So the patching, the updating, all of that service is done in the back end by Cisco because it's a SaaS-based offer. So we're eliminating that overhead from the customer in having to manage that. And likewise with the full stack AI pods, what we're doing there is that we have some very targeted use cases that each of these pods is tuned for. So as I said, it could be for AI training, it could be for edge inferencing, it could be for RAG. And so these pods, you would buy the pod and it comes pre-packaged. So the pod has like a rack with a whole bunch of gear in it. It's pre-racked, it's pre-stacked, it's pre-cabled, software's pre-loaded. You literally buy the AI pod from Cisco. You roll it into your organization, you take off the plastic wrapping, you plug it into the wall socket, you power it on, and it's ready to go. So everything there, hardware, software, everything's kind of ready, pre-configured, pre-ready for you to start using for your particular use case that you want to run that for. So that's what we're doing with that there.
Yeah, and I'm assuming so that's hardware, right? So obviously
It's
there's
hardware and software. Hardware
yeah,
and
right.
software. Yeah.
Just to go to Joseph's comment, force might be the wrong term, but the option there is they may well need to upgrade their network infrastructure across the board to take advantage of this new infrastructure, I suppose. But although this is infrastructure as a service, they can supplement existing infrastructure.
Correct. So this is to complement. You will have an existing set of infrastructure in place today. And let's shall we say that the organization that you're working for decides that we're going to start dabbling in like trialing out some large language models. So you need some compute, some storage, some networking to host and run that. So there's a range of options that we have. So this would be complementary to what you have in place today. Look, ideally, we'd love to be able to rip and replace everything. That's practically not going to be the reality for most organizations. There's going to be some additions that will complement their existing infrastructure as and when they start to look to explore to bring in new workloads into their, the overall set of workloads that they're running across their data center.
It sounds like they can start with training data as a start, right? They can start to just do some training and sort of see how it runs.
So we have like one of the AI pods. In fact, we have a number of AI pods that could be used for exactly that. Depending on the size of the model that you're looking to run, depending on what you're looking to do, we have a number of different AI pod options that could be used to get the ball rolling for the customer.
Great. We'll move on to David and Carl. Let us know. You've got a couple of other slides, I know, but we'll come back to you on that. But David, I've got one here more on the safety and the security side. And just for the audience, if you're not familiar with some of the terminology, those links I provided will provide that. But hallucinations has always been a key one for me in terms of AI. If you can make an AI hallucinate, that's a whole new security vector that we might not have traditionally been facing. But yeah, just cover off on safety and security within the architecture.
Thanks, Chris. I wanted to use this slide because, if you come from a security background, you're probably used to things like buffer overruns and cross-site scripting attacks and antivirus technology and the types of things that we do around traditional firewalls and security best practices. I think that's relatively well understood in the security industry. And then along come these AI models, and yes, you still have that. You can have a cross-site scripting attack in an LLM, but now you have these elements of safety which are not traditionally thought of as security issues, and they can be hallucinations, hate speech, toxicity, and a lot of the time, I think. When we think about AI, we don't understand the fundamental underpinnings of how these LLM systems work. So there's this term I'd use around traditional code being deterministic. And what I mean by that is, if you go to a traditional computer and you go, hey, what's 2 + 2? It'll tell you it's 4. Now you go to an AI system, it'll tell you it's probably 4 with a 0.999 probability, but everything in an AI system is probabilistic. So sometimes we ask an AI system a question and the probability of the answer being true is nowhere near to 1, might only be, excuse me, it might only be a probability of 0.25. So it'll give you an answer. In that sense, it's like a 10-year-old doing a maths test that's multiple choice and it's just picking like one of the 4 random numbers. So because of the way these AI systems are developed using probability, they are occasionally going to give you something that's unpredictable that you don't expect. So then you need to start thinking about, well, what sort of guardrails and safety techniques do I put in to minimize the impact of that? Because we want to be able to deploy these AI systems in a safe and responsible way. They've got a lot of benefits, but we also need to know the new challenges around putting them into production and managing them. So there's this balance now where I say it's not just security, but you need to think of safety as well. And when you get into this safety arena, it's actually fairly well understood. We've been working to influence the standards. Cisco's been working with various standard bodies, And there's standard bodies like OWASP that, just like NIST does for various security elements, the various threat vectors around AI are understood, and there's a whole standards framework and a way to deal with those. So that's kind of the safety versus security element, is that AI is different, and we do need to think about the safety aspects of it.
Well, I got one the other day. You just created one of the threat actors created a sort of a fake scenario, and that broke the LLM completely, because it didn't have an imagination in that context. They're quite defined in what they do. Is there any here that are quite common? Carl, I know when we did our session for the interview in terms of AI defense, there are sort of 300 plus known vulnerabilities that AI defense picks up. Any sort of stand out, particularly on this list here, that are more common than others?
Look,
or developing even?
Yeah, the ones that are gaining a little bit of notoriety in the marketplace right now, I mean, there's a few, but the prompt injection attack is probably the classic one. There's a very good story from about a year ago that I've been sharing with a lot of my colleagues and some customers around a car dealership in California that thought they'd be at the forefront of tech and decided to release this AI chatbot to help customers buy a car. And this individual decided to take advantage of this and use the prompt injection attack. And if you understand prompts, what David was talking about, when you use ChatGPT or Gemini, you get this text prompt interface that you put in your prompt. You might be like, who's the 37th president of the United States? And you get a response back from the AI model. But there's a second kind of prompt that is also used in setting up the AI. It's a system prompt. It really defines the boundaries, the operation paradigm of how the AI model is going to operate. So in this particular case, there would have been some system prompts around, you are a car chatbot, you're going to be answering questions around cars, the particular models, the pricing, yada, yada, yada. And unfortunately, some models have a little bit of a vulnerability here because they can't differentiate between who issues those prompts. And in this particular case, this individual got connected to the chat bot from this car dealer and convinced, actually changed user system prompt to change the behavior of the chatbot to agree to sell him a car for $1. We can smirk and laugh at that, but of course, it's not good for the car dealer. But it actually shows a situation of how these models can be compromised. And it's for that reason that, when you start to look at these kinds of vulnerabilities, and what I said earlier on, you look at the existing portfolio of security solutions that most have in place today, they're all about protecting who can connect to. They're not necessarily focused on protecting how users use these solutions. So David kind of alluded to this. If I was to initiate a prompt that says, how do I hotwire a car? Now, you can probably look at that surface and say, that's something that I'm not going to provide a response to. And most models might be configured in such a way that they recognize this and say, okay, I'm not going to provide an answer to this. But then you start getting a little bit nuanced in how you initiate that prompt. Maybe you say, I'm doing a PhD thesis on how to better protect cars from being stolen. And you start to kind of weave into that prompt a question which you're trying to trick the AI into providing you the answer. And that's like an example of how, you start to think, how can I protect against that from happening? And this is what led to us, as in Cisco, releasing the AI Defence solution. Because to what David said about OWASP as an example, you've got these industry standard bodies who've identified all these different vulnerabilities. And we've taken that knowledge and insight and we've packaged that into our AI Defence solution. And we now are bringing to market a solution that can actually secure how users use those models, which complements the existing portfolio of security solutions we have, which protect who you can connect to. So it's really an extension of, but a really important extension that's going to have a really important play as organizations start to make these AI applications, chatbots and services available.
And just to clarify, Sorry, David, you go.
Chris, I was going to say, let me touch on a couple of other examples that are very relevant. So there was like a research engineer at a major electronics company, and they developed a new product. So they went to ChatGPT and said, hey, can you write me a product data sheet to describe the product? Now, one of the things that happens with all these LLM providers is they usually like log all of the responses and inputs, and then they use that to improve their model over time. So later, someone went in and said, hey, tell me what this company's got in the R&D pipeline. And the chatbot was able to share information about unreleased products. Another example would be, this was a real one for Air Canada. This guy had a death in the family and wanted to know what the bereavement policy was. And he went to the chatbot and said, hey, what's the bereavement policy? And the chatbot gave out the bereavement policy for another airline on behalf of Air Canada, and then he challenged it in court. So there's a number of different ones. I think there's 10 different categories in OWASP. In a way, what we've had to do is it's almost like developing a virus scanner. You develop a red teaming model scanner that can go in and using AI adversarially analyze another AI to find the vulnerabilities and then give you back a report card going, hey, here's how safe or compliant a particular model is. Another very common one is PII information. Most people don't want to be transferring credit cards or driver's license ID, transferring some of that secret information outside an organization. So these are all things models can be vulnerable to if not implemented in a safe manner.
Well, it's going to be my question. This is AI Defence is a software model that would sit, and maybe where does it sit? Is it a subscription where the the AI being deployed runs through AI Defence first before going live? Yeah, just describe sort of the model here and how it's deployed.
Sure. So AI Defence is a multi-tenanted SaaS solution. That's kind of where we start. So it is hosted in the cloud. It actually consists of 4 components. The first component is a visibility engine. So the idea behind this is that in your organization, there's probably going to be a number of AI solutions, chatbots, data sets, models that are being authorized by the company, and you're working on that. So it's going to do an audit. It's going to look at all of the models, all of the applications and chatbots in use. It's going to look at the users who are using those AI solutions. It's looking at the data sets being used. And this is both official and also shadow AI assets. And it's going to present this in a list to you. So at a glance, you're going to be able to see straight away who's using what is available, and also all those shadow components that might be brought in by employees in the organization. That's a good start. The second thing kind of David alluded to is this kind of penetration test, the red teaming, where you can say for a given model, I actually want to validate and see how many vulnerabilities this particular model is exposed to. And so what might take days or weeks to do manually, we within a couple of minutes will actually test that model against those known vulnerabilities and actually produce a report that tells you, we've tested against this number of vulnerabilities, it's passed this, and here's some areas that it hasn't passed. So that's kind of going to give you an indication of the vulnerabilities and the risk that particular model might present should you release that in production to your customers. The third thing is a AI runtime protection. So this is where we have identified a series of guardrails that we can deploy to close down those vulnerabilities. So what we do here is that we actually work in conjunction with some other components of our portfolio to actually instantiate those policies, and they become the enforcement points. So for example, if you have a client who's kind of remote, might be using an SSE client, we can instantiate that policy into our SSE client. We can instantiate that into our multi-cloud cloud defense solution. There's a number of different enforcement points where they can actually hold the policy or those guardrails that AI Defence creates. And then the last element of that is what we call AI access. And this is really looking at the prompts and the responses between the user and the model. And this is kind of, again, what the example I gave, what David gave around you start issuing these prompts, and we have a reasoning model that sits in between. So what will happen is that when the user initiates a prompt, it goes to our AI engine. We pass that and we look at that prompt. We look at it to see if it's harmful, if it's toxic, if it's looking to source private data information. And then we make an assessment on whether or not we're going to allow that prompt to go through. Now, as I said, you can start getting really crafty in a nuanced in how you build that prompt. So I can say, how do I hotwire a car? We'll probably pick that up and go, no, we're not going to answer that. But then you can maybe, 3, 4, 5 iterations down, you start getting really clever in how you're weaving and crafting that prompt. It might get through. But then the response that comes back from the AI model also goes into our AI model. And we then look at the content of that to see if that's something that we want to be delivering. So if, for example, the user were to trick or create a prompt that's trying to maybe get company sensitive information on, shall we say, employee contact details, and that prompt kind of slips through our engine, when the response comes back with the emails and the phone numbers of the employees, we can look at that and go, no, we're not going to allow that to go through. So it works both ways. But the point is that we will create an event log, which will actually showcase these prompts, the responses that could have potentially been sent back, and provide you with that security. But more importantly, we want to do this in a simple way. So you're not having to craft and curate specific or extensive policies to lock this down. That knowledge is already built into our AI Defence portfolio. So when we identify that a model has a certain number of vulnerabilities, we will actually say, we recommend these guardrails be deployed on that to protect that model. And you literally click a button and those guardrails will then be deployed into the enforcement points that we've got, be it AI Defence, SSE, or down the track firewalls, to protect those AI assets and how they're used by those users. So it's really a very complementary solution that complements existing portfolio security solutions that we have in place today. Again, focused on securing how users use those AI assets.
How flexible is it, Carl, in terms of deployment? Can you just start with, say, the AI agent and sort of do that audit first? Are those sort of 4 components modularized?
Yes, so there are, I forget off the top of my head how we package them, but you don't have to subscribe to use all of them. You can actually subscribe to use a selection of them, but you typically start with that visibility. The first thing you need to do is understand what assets you've got in your organization. So that's a good starting point, just to understand and run this audit. I've got this number of models, I've got this number of chatbots, I've got this number of AI applications, I've got these users who are using those AI assets, both official and unofficial, and also these are the data sets that are being used by those chatbots or those models. So that presents you with a starting point, at least, to understand what you have inside your organization.
Chris, I call that shadow AI. You remember the days of shadow IT and you had all of these apps being deployed around the place?
Yeah.
These days you have shadow AI, and most people don't know what AI is being used in their organization because everyone's trying it, but you don't have a full grasp. So this first part of it can scan your AWS instance and identify all of your AI services.
So that's within a sort of cloud platform, or say Azure or AWS. What about through sort of the physical aspects? Is it an AI sort of agent that goes through and hunts through the infrastructure, or do you point it at infrastructure and it just how is it actually deployed in that context? So I'm also thinking from, say, an independent auditor coming in and doing a risk assessment and wanting to deploy it on a client's infrastructure.
Yeah, so look, where we are today with this product, it's very, very new. I think it's been out 6 weeks or so. So today you point it at an AWS instance and it'll scan it. Now, in our roadmap is adding the capability to scan the GCP instance, and I think that's not too far away. And then we'll also have the Azure instance. So you'll be able to scan AWS, Azure, GCP. We also announced at GTC last week, the big NVIDIA AI conference, that our intention is to bring this capability to the enterprise customers that want to deploy secure AI factories so that they can run models on premises in the same way. That's a little way away from being able to to deliver that. I have had some defense customers come to me and say, hey, I'm interested in using some of these open source models. Maybe I pick up a model like YOLO to do computer vision classification, or maybe I want to pick up something like Llama 70B and then have it scan my intelligence reports and summarize those. What you can do is you can set up a private instance to scan the model. I understand the vulnerabilities. And then once you understand the vulnerabilities, you transfer that model after it's been scanned to the air gap network, and you have a report card of what the concerns and challenges around that model are. But the enforcement is not yet able to run on premises to provide active protection inside your data center.
Right. No, I was thinking things like a university environment where you're going to have everyone sort of running their own and even creating their own models as well. The concept of AI defense, particularly applying the OWASP sort of frameworks and knowledge base, is quite unique. And as you say, only 6 weeks old. Carl, did you want to just walk us through? You've got a couple other slides that you can talk us through on here, but the AI runtime and the like. One other question I did have before I'll jump in, if there's none others from the audience. Just in your dealings with clients, is this responsibility, I suppose, with AI sitting within the security teams, or are you finding the privacy teams or just the CIO picking this up rather than the CISO and the security teams?
Yeah, so
you go, David.
Yeah, so Cisco's published a responsible AI framework. I can share the link to it. There's also a responsible AI framework that's been published by the Australian government through the Responsible AI Network and the work that CSIRO and Data 61 were doing. And it goes through the various elements like guidance and oversight, controls, incidents management, industry leadership, external engagement. It is multifaceted. So it does wind up requiring input from legal counsel, from ethics, security. So I'd say, yes, it is multidisciplinary. The security team will have a role to play, but I think the security team can't do this alone. It's going to require broader engagement from the organization, because as you're dealing with elements like being off topic or toxicity, some of these elements are judgment and ethics calls, and the call is going to be different for different organizations. So I think having those right stakeholders aligned is really important. And the responsible AI framework we've laid out takes you through how to go ahead and build that strategy and what to think about. More than happy to share that.
Nice. And Carl, are you dealing mainly with CTOs as well, or you finding the CIOs and the CISOs are jointly taking interest?
Everyone's taking interest.
Okay, good answer.
I think it's fair to say, if we go back a couple of years, security was always top of mind. Customers were focused on automation and assurance and things like that. But definitely AI is the number one talk topic today. Pretty much every organization that I engage with, and it's at all levels of the organization, David, whether it's I've had a couple of very high-level CEO engagement conversations. They're interested in it. CIOs, CTOs, even your classic network managers are also very interested in it. More so, what do we need to do from an infrastructure side? What are you doing with your infrastructure developments that are going to enable this? So it's definitely everyone. It's top of mind for everyone, and it's the one conversation that I pretty much get involved in on an ongoing basis. And there is a slide another slide, maybe if I can share something.
Go through, you can take over if you're ready.
Yep. So this slide here tries to encompass all of the moving parts that we have across AI. It's not everything, but it's kind of some of the top areas. And we've obviously talked about AI-ready infrastructure. That's the compute, storage, networking, GPUs, DPUs, the partnerships with NVIDIA, AMD, and so on. That's, of course, not foundational to getting everything off and running. But you have all these other interesting areas. There's, you start looking at data. Data is going to be really key. Splunk acquisition that we made last year is going to have a really important play in that. AI assistance is another area that I think not a lot of people are fully appreciate where the industry is going with that. The industry's created this and coined this term LLM ops, or large language model operations. And the idea behind this, if you think way back, it used to be CLI. CLI was king in terms of administrating your network. We kind of evolved that into the DevOps world, where you'd use scripts to automate your infrastructure. And then we kind of started to see AI slowly get embedded into the solutions, where you've got these AI functions running in the background, kind of hopefully augmenting and optimizing the productivity of administrators. But we're now getting into this notion of AI assistance, where you have effectively a ChatGPT style interface sitting on top of your dashboard. And so rather than clicking on a bunch of buttons with your mouse and clicking submit, you now are having a verbal kind of text-based interaction with an AI assistant to put into effect workflows. And when you look at what Cisco is doing, we're moving very, very fast in this space. We introduced our first AI assistant back December 23 on our firewall management center. So basically an AI assistant to help an administrator define and administer their security policies. And since then, we've launched around 12 AI assistants across our portfolio. We've got it across Splunk, WebEx, Thousand Eyes, we've got it across Nexus, networking. And now we're starting to see those coalesce and converge. Most recently at our Cisco Live show in Amsterdam, we launched what we call the Unified AI System for Security. So you now have this one AI assistant that is used to actually administer all of the security functions that we have as part of our Cisco Security Cloud portfolio. And so this is really an interesting paradigm of how we see the industry moving and the way in which administrators are going to be in the future managing their infrastructure. We've got obviously the AI operations, which is, as I said, this embedded AI functionality that sits in the background. And chances are that many of you who are listening today might be using Cisco solutions and unwittingly or unknowingly knowing that there's actually AI functions sitting in the background doing their thing. For a lot of customers, they might not even appreciate that there's an AI function actually running in existing off-the-shelf solutions that they're consuming from Cisco today. The AI security, as I said, is the AI defense is a part of that. We also have this new HyperShield solution, which is pretty cool. The agentic AI is another area we're starting to see as more and more customers start to think about how they can reimagine the way in which they service their customers through call centers. We're going very heavy into the agentic AI world, where you have this AI agent that can actually front-end conversations with the customer. You can have control over how you want that interaction to happen. It could be through a scripting, like we ask them a series of questions, if this, then that, or it could be free-flowing, where you're talking to this agent that sounds like a human, but is actually an AI entity. And if you think about the opportunity of, let's shall we say, as your call volumes go up during the day, being able to spin up additional AI agents to handle that call volume so that your customers are not left on the line for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. So this, again, represents a very new way of servicing customers, but that's a new area. And we have predictive AI. A lot of our customers know that we've had a predictive AI engine in play in the market for over 2 years. And this is deployed on the wide area network, where we're looking at how we can make predictions around potential problems that are going to happen before they actually happen. And actually alerting our administrators saying, hey, I think there's going to be a problem here. You might want to make this change. And I suggest you do it before it becomes more problematic for you. And so we're seeing more of this predictive AI also starting to come into play. And then we've got the partnerships, as I said, with NVIDIA, with Nutanix, with NetApp, with AMD, all these companies who have solutions that we are going to be bringing into play as part of our portfolio. The investment fund is something we launched at Cisco Live last year. We said that we're going to be investing $1 billion into new startups. We recognize that Cisco, while we try to build as much as we can't do it all by ourselves. And so here we're looking to invest in startups where their technology might actually find its way into our solutions at some point in the future. So we're looking at bleeding edge organizations who are doing some really innovative and interesting things, making investments in them, There could be potential down the road for Cisco to acquire. Who knows? We just don't know. But we're investing in these companies so that we can partner with them and hopefully take advantage of their technology to integrate into our future solutions. And then David covered the ethical piece. These are all elements of our security story. We've kind of hyper-focused in on the security part of it in this conversation today. But it's important to understand that AI actually represents a really important part of our overall strategy. And it's playing a really heavy role in shaping a lot of the solutions that we're going to be bringing to market.
Nice. And I suppose the other aspect to that is the AI engines collectively with Cisco are learning along the way, hence why they're learning quite rapidly, and they can take all of that sort of collective learning and apply it or reapply it back into itself. So it is quite an interesting story. There is a question here. What is your view on balancing accelerating innovation and laying a solid security foundation? Is there an AI security framework a business can refer to when considering implementing AI solutions? I think David referred to some of that earlier in terms of the guardrails and the like. But Carl, where do you see, you being the CTO for Australia and New Zealand, you mentioned the 4% versus the 15% ready. Yep. There's a seemingly a strong need for uplift here in Australia. The market, is that reflective of what you see?
Yeah, there is. In fact, let me kind of go back to, did I stop sharing the slides?
You did, yes.
Let me just share this slide again. There is actually, if I could just go back to my presentation.
Yep, got it.
I want to kind of talk about this because this kind of gives you a rundown. This AI Readiness Index that we launched, and you can Google it. You can do a Google search for Cisco AI Readiness Index. The assessment that we did, we challenged customers with a whole series of questions across these 6 categories. And this is what we use to assess, to have an organization assess how ready they are to start adopting and deploying AI. Most who I speak to when we start thinking about, okay, are you ready? They straight away go to infrastructure. And that's absolutely an important part of it. You need to have the right compute, the right storage, the right networking to be able to support those workloads and those applications. But there's also a whole lot of adjacent areas that you need to start thinking about as well. Strategy is really key. Does your board actually support your AI strategy? Okay, are they funding it? Is it part of the strategy? That's a really important part. If you don't have that, then you're not going to get far on the other 5. Infrastructure, as I said, it kind of makes sense. There's compute, storage, networking. You need to have the right pieces in place to be able to support those workloads. You need to start thinking about governance. How is your organization focusing on privacy, bias, fairness, all those elements that are going to have an important play in the kind of services you're going to be delivering to the customer. Your data, I mean, good data in is going to yield good outcome. Is your data in one place? Is it scattered throughout your organization? Is it clean? The cleanliness of your data you're feeding into the model is going to yield good output. To the point around David mentioned about hallucinations, hopefully the more data that you use, the cleaner the data, you're going to get more pertinent and more prescriptive answers from your model. You need to have the right talent in place, be able to support the infrastructure, the applications, and the assets that you're going to be delivering. And then last but not least, it's culture. Do you have the right culture in place in your organization that you have employees who are actually going to want to use the AI tools that you make available? So these things collectively kind of all go in. And I think there's actually this slide here, which I kind of want to point people to. If you go to this Cisco AI Readiness webpage, there's this little button down there, which I'd encourage everyone to try out. It's called Take the Assessment. And you can actually answer the exact same questions that were posed to those 8,200-ish organizations. And you can self-assess yourself and your organization on how ready you are. But more importantly, you can then benchmark yourself against the numbers that you get. So that's the results across the board in terms of readiness. If you want to be at the left-hand side on the green. Greens mean you are fully prepared. Red means you're not prepared. The orange means that you limited preparedness. The blue means you're moderately prepared but not fully prepared. And you can kind of see here that the results, Australia unfortunately is a little bit behind our peers in the marketplace. But every organization can go to that website, take the same questions, and you can then benchmark your readiness number against these numbers here. And you can also do it by industry vertical as well, because we break out the numbers based on industry verticals. So by healthcare, by retail, by finance, by manufacturing, higher education, so on. So you can actually see at a pinch where you sit. And I would say that as you go through those questions also, there's probably going to be some questions that will challenge you that you might not necessarily have thought about. So it might be a little bit thought-provoking and help you move along and focus your efforts on areas that you need to double down on so that you are ready to start taking advantage of AI when your C-suite asks you to do so.
Beautiful, Carl. Thank you so much. I'm going to take over there. We should be up there. Look, just given on based on the time, and unless there's any final questions from the audience, we will get that link to the AI Readiness Index. If I had an on, I would have put that in the chat already, but we'll have it in the show notes for this particular session. And David, you're still with us. Your screen has frozen. We got you there. But look, just with interest to time, I'm going to close off the session. But Carl and David, thank you so much for today. It was a really good deep dive. Those links that I put out in the chat, we'll have them in the show notes as well, but it's worth having a look through the report as well as that blog session on AI Defence, and also give the AI Readiness Index a go. But thank you so much. A great opening session. As you say, everyone takes interest in this topic. I think one question we didn't ask is who should be responsible for AI. We might close off on that. Carly, do we anticipate having a sort of a chief AI officer, or is it sticking with the CTO? Yeah, what are you seeing in that regards in terms of people who should be responsible for this?
Yeah, inside Cisco, we actually have now dedicated an engineering leader to focus on AI. And I think that's probably reflective of where most organizations are going. It's either going to be the remit of the CTO, especially probably if it's a little bit early. But certainly, I think as you go a little bit more further in your journey, having an AI owner, as David probably will agree with me, AI touches a number of different parts of the business. There's a security angle, there's an application angle, there's a data angle, there's an infrastructure angle. So because it touches on many different aspects of the organization, it might actually make better sense to have an individual own and run that.
Well, I think there's opportunity there for security and risk professionals, even just the AI in terms of security and technology risk, sticking your hand up and saying, yeah, we want to carry that. Because again, still relatively early days, not that AI is all that new, but its deployment and applications, as Carl pointed out, is covering on all aspects. Look, thank you so much, gents. David Sirocki, the AI architecture lead with Cisco Systems, and Carl Solder, the Chief Technology Officer for Cisco Australia and New Zealand. Very insightful session, gents. As part of the series, our next session will be around the 14th to the 16th of April. Part of that will be a State of Trust webinar with Vanta, Security Compliance and the Future of Trust. And we've got a few episodes coming up with ISACA chapters in Auckland, Sydney and in Melbourne as well, in and around the State of Trust. But thank you very much for attending. For those that are interested, the Indo-Pacific Robotics, Autonomy, AI and Cyber Conference, we've got Carl lined up as a speaker there already in October. And Carl, that locks you in there, mate. You can't get out of that now. But thank you very much for attending. This session will be available within our links, and otherwise subscribe now to the Security and Risk Professional Insight series. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon wherever you're listening from. But on that, I'll close off and thanks very much for attending. Thank you.